Welcome. My name is Fergus Wills. I'm Director of Product for Enea. Today we're going to be talking to Dimitris Mavrakis, Senior Research Director for ABI Research for Telecom Networks. We're going to be talking today about ABI Research's recent report on the importance of distributed data platforms in 5G. So first of all, I'd like to welcome Dimitris to this conversation.
Thank you very much, Fergus.
Thanks. And I think you make a key point in the report that 5G architecture is truly revolutionary, both in its service-based approach and in the control and user plane separation. So if we are deploying a true 5G architecture, what do you say for those vendors and operators on that journey? What's the benefit, what's the prize in being more true to how 5G is actually specified?
Well, the prize and I guess the end product of a successful strategy would be these enterprise business models, right? What 5G core network will enable is flexibility, scalability, and the ability to appropriate the network, to customize the network for different types of use cases, right? So an operator would offer a completely different application and network features to a mining company or to a manufacturing company or to a healthcare company. And that is what 5G will allow, essentially, the ability to customize the network in the long term, right? In the short term, all of these new features like the service-based architecture will help operators to reduce cost and move to cloud-native architectures, which are much more scalable than before.
Yeah, I think it's that flexibility, both in the use case and the deployment to be cloud-native, that's really interesting. I mean, a core lifeblood of the network is data, and a core point in the report is that that data platform should be distributed. Can you tell us why?
So this is a very good question and something that we see across our research at the moment. So in general, we see processing systems being distributed, and obviously 5G networks will eventually become a distributed connected computing system, right? So with edge computing, with control and user plane separation, with edge servers and so on. So processing capability in general starts to get distributed, and even going as far as on-prem deployments, right? So applications running on-premise. So it's only natural that the data platforms that enable these networks also become distributed, because it wouldn't make sense for the data collected, say, for a machine vision application, to be transferred from the on-prem sensor, the camera, all the way up to the core network or even the public cloud, right? That would be gigabytes of data transferring through the network. So it makes sense for the data platform itself to live in a distributed system, right? Perhaps even on-prem in an edge server, and process this data on-prem, right? Now, obviously, this will not happen overnight, so we don't expect data platforms to be in enterprise deployments on-prem, but still, all support systems, and especially platforms that store and process data, need to distribute further than the core network.
So we're looking at maybe three different vectors of innovation: one from the use case perspective, one from the deployment perspective in terms of being cloud native and being agile, and then one in terms of how the core data, the lifeblood of the network, is actually managed and distributed cost effectively. Would you have a view of who's getting it right out there in the field right now?
So as far as we can see, all operators around the world are assessing their data strategy, right? Both for consumer and enterprise use cases. And we see all sorts of different strategies. For example, some operators are outsourcing their data strategy completely to hyperscalers. But many others are working with vendors, and many others, like Telenor, for example, are thinking long term and trying to deploy a multi-vendor system with distributed data platforms. So perhaps Telenor is an early example of an operator who gets it right, from our perspective at least.
I'm glad you mentioned Telenor, because the Enea team were partly involved in that. So I'm glad to hear that we're getting it right as well. It is a multi-vendor environment, very flexible. Just as it's a very insightful report, but would you have any key takeaways and recommendations for the reader of this report?
Well, a key recommendation is to start this transition as soon as possible, right? So the traditional centralized data platform approach that operators have been building their networks on will not scale for 5G, right? Especially if we factor in enterprise business models and these distributed use cases. And perhaps data platform is one piece of the puzzle. Operators need to change their operational processes in order to be able to manage these distributed connected computing platforms. And perhaps data platforms is a key area to start with. So I would recommend operators to start assessing how to migrate from the centralized model to the distributed model, not necessarily data platforms, but in general.
Yes, that's certainly, we would concur with that as Enea. It's a very insightful report, and we highly recommend that everybody has a read of it. Dimitris Manvrakis, Senior Research Director, ABI Research, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Fergus. Thank you for the opportunity.